Huh?
I said, good luck with that. Some people do it, but I don't.
Do what?
Have every one of my passwords different.
Well,
That's too much.
it is a lot, believe me.
That actually works.
Hey there. I'm good. How are you doing?
Whoops.
Computer this time.
Perfect.
Ron and I had
Or
to
if you're
switch
running
last
the-
time.
If you're running the traffic lights out of
Yeah, I wouldn't drink the water. It's probably been sitting in there for a while. Well, just the city hall sandy.
Mine worked flawlessly from the start.
Morning.
There we go.
How you doing?
Good,
Oh,
yourself?
slow side here.
Had a friend last week down at the refined establishment at the bar and had good lunch.
Wasn't my pick.
Bill King walks in and sits down beside me. And Brad, he comes over and he parks on another booth on the other side of the Grand Central Station. All the movers and shakers.
Go real fast.
Morning, you know where we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't see your email.
How you doing, Dave?
Is it
There's all that.
That's fine.
It's worth that.
That's always a little
Always
scary.
if there's,
Yeah.
Dave
if there's something bad,
says I'm
I don't
password
have to go looking for the app. Get them in, Don?
I can work
They,
that.
they can't wait to tell you. It doesn't matter who it is. I'm trying to figure, how come I can't get it in here?
You're not
I guess your mouth seems to work, so that's good.
We would refuse to read them.
Ah,
You're not Lori, that's the Rick's probably got.
yeah, maybe. Ah. All right, I'm thank you, Don.
Is that,
Thank you, Emily.
Is that tie guy coming tonight then? I think so. Tie guy.
Thai guy, yes. Thank you. Thai guy is, I think, coming. That's my understanding.
Wow, that's an interesting sound.
It's one that I can try to usually I can usually hear.
Pardon?
I can usually overhear it.
Oh,
Possibly.
I forget, is it our, I think it's our Hyatt register that goes first. Because we have this,
Hi, Emily.
this thing that we can light candles with, and
Okay.
it zaps. And Dave and I, we do it, and we don't hear anything, and the kids are like, stop that.
Is this
It's
a
like this.
boilerplate letter? Seems like we've got.
Yes, we've had before for that place.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
David, the annexation is legislative, right?
The annexation is actually quasi-judicial.
Oh, they're both. Okay.
It'll result in an ordinance, but since we're talking about one piece of property and there are
Oh,
criteria.
okay.
What's their deal in driving? I can't remember it. Something, we've gotten this several times in the past.
Well, we
How's all this other stuff? We try one more here.
told me he didn't address it, well, he addressed it with one sentence somewhere.
I know there's a lot of outlets.
That's to him because we already showed, we have a deficiency in single family residential when we did the thing, so.
That works.
And then we have something here.
Okay, what's our bet on being
I don't know. Tracy's advocating for the other guys, so. They make sure they this and that to these guys again. You were on the committee.
Yeah,
But you read the
I was just
thing
gonna make
that
sure,
I
do you have the presentation?
Yeah.
I remember, we dealt with that. But it was, I couldn't believe it.
You're gonna stand.
I was here.
I'm a sitting
person.
representative. You're a standing representative.
I'm no more than 10.
So that, we adopted that was after the Sandy Stone was
For some
planted.
reason, I get nervous when I stand.
Well, there's objections on the Sandy Stone, so.
But we went, but it wasn't a retrofit. It
Usually I'll plug in, I'll get my
was whether they could use the site for the RV, for the purpose of selling RVs.
Yeah, but I mean, they had it, they just done it at that time, we wouldn't be here. They were gonna, flatten it out, whatever you said. We said, yeah, fine, we just wanna make sure the bigger sidewalks.
But they came back to the can later on, and they wanted to bring that piece in.
Okay.
Remember
It's
that.
all you when you're ready. I think, well,
Uh,
is the broadcast
that's
going?
9:30.
Is the broadcast going?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good? Alrighty, good evening, vast crowd in the council chambers to
They
the
pay? Well, don't pay them, no problem.
meeting of the City of Sandy Planning Commission for Tuesday. We're doing a different day, Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. We have a different agenda, special thing in the beginning, but we will start first with roll call. Give us a
Roll call.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who's gonna do the roll call over
I will
there?
do it right now.
He's
I was
thankful
reading
that
an
there's
email,
name
sorry.
tags on it.
Commissioner Carlton.
Here.
Commissioner Lasowski.
Present.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Mobley.
Here.
Commissioner Mayton.
Present.
And Chairman Crosby.
Here.
You're gonna work your way up to scribe here pretty quick.
Okay, we had minutes from two meetings, 19th of March and the 8th of April in our packet. We can take them together if there's no, well, do you have it, are there
We
any
need to make
corrections?
sure that who was here, we need to abstain.
Yeah, let me see.
Yeah, I was
Ron's
not, I was
gotta
not here for the
abstain
March
on-
one.
No,
Let's see.
March 19.
Do they have to be separate? Is that right?
John, I know you were here.
was here.
So only Chris wasn't here
Right.
on March 19 and April 8th.
I was present.
let's do it in two separate ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, Ron's got to abstain on the first one.
No,
Okay.
I was here for the March 19th.
Uh,
I think I was.
March 19, present was myself, Todd, John, Hollis, Don, and Ron. Any additions, corrections, changes noted in that one, March 19?
No.
Okay,
I move we accept that set of meeting.
Second.
The Monday, April 8th,
Yes,
I second that.
or the March 19th,
Tuesday.
right?
March,
March
sorry.
I move we
Okay.
accept the minutes from the March
we'll
19th
give you a
meeting.
second on the next one.
Sure.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say
Was
aye.
Hollis the second?
Yes,
Aye,
Hollis
yeah.
is second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
okay.
And
Any
Commissioner
opposed?
Maiden wasn't on the council at that time.
That's right.
Abstain.
Just say the one abstention,
He was on the next one.
yes.
Mhm.
Okay, then the April 8th meeting minutes. And John's going to second this one, whoever first. Any additions, corrections, changes noted that need to be noted?
I have none.
I move we accept the planning commission meeting minutes on April 8th as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved, John seconded. April 8th minutes, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Don't believe so. Okay. And this is the time in each of our meetings when we give opportunity for anybody in the audience who's here would like to speak to the planning commission on an issue that is not on tonight's agenda.
I would anticipate there'll be more people showing up for the other two items. But
Yeah, so we want to get going so we don't, with less interruptions.
They snooze, they lose on this one.
Yep, okay. Nothing seen, well, let's go right ahead and go right into our transit update.
Yeah, and just to be very clear, that I think we talked about this. The meeting, how I have it set up is once we're done with transit, we can hop right in.
Right,
So if people aren't here, there's no work session listed.
Right, we are already in our official
Correct.
meeting, so we just will
Correct.
roll right into things.
That's a great idea.
And does she need to be at the mic for the recording, or does it matter? I don't know how.
I think it will catch her.
Okay,
Probably
okay,
turn one of the
good.
mics around. Yeah, we can catch it. But it should catch you wherever you're in the room.
Okay, well, thank you for having me back. I'm Michelle Poirot. I'm a transit planner based in Oregon. I work all over the country on big cities and small cities like Sandy. Working with Andy on this transit plan. We are through the first phase of public engagement, so we learned a bunch of things from the public, and now is a time when we would like to hear from the Planning Commission and also from City Council some guidance on basically the high-level policy choices that this plan should reflect. There are technical things that I can say Sandy Transit should just do because they're just good, like real-time transit arrival information is just good. So at some point, Sandy will do that. You know, bus shelters are just good. Just do them when you can afford them. There are other things that are not obviously the right thing to do because they trade off against things that people value. And so that's where we're focusing people's attention on this plan. That's where we have been focusing people's attention so that we can gather input on the questions that we can't answer. Our expertise isn't relevant in answering the questions. Our expertise is just relevant in framing the questions. So I'm going to review those a little bit with you and then report on some of the input that we've received. You received a link to a public input summary, which has charts explaining, showing the answers that large numbers of people gave to questions and also information about who gave input in various ways. So if you have more specific questions for me, I might not know off the top of my head, but I can look it up in the summary. Okay, so I'm going to start. For a little historical context and a little transit service context, I'm going to show you this graph that I showed you 2 months ago. This is a line graph showing ridership per service hour on all of the services that Sandy Transit offers. The red line is the Gresham Express, and this is the 10 years worth of data. The green line is the Estacada Express. The yellow line is the newly created Shopper Shuttles. The blue line is Star, Dial-A-Ride, and Paratransit. Those are one combined service. And then the purple line is elderly and disabled out-of-town medical transport. So a couple of stories can be told from this graph. One is that the Shopper Shuttles have taken off. They were introduced, and over a couple of years, the ridership has grown. Great success story. That was an important part of your last transit plan that has been implemented. Very beloved by the community, by people who ride them, and by people who don't ride them. I think it really builds a sense of pride, even if you don't ride them, to know that people can meet their needs within town. That line is like pointing up to infinity and beyond, but that's not where it's going to go. The record for an in-town circulator like that is about 10 riders per hour. Seems to be about what you can expect. So I wouldn't expect the Shopper Shuttles to get more productive than the Gresham Express, but they're doing great. The other story you can tell here is, oh wow, ridership on our fixed routes has really fallen since 2009, and this is not at all unique to Sandy. It's very similar in lots of different cities. When we look at peer agencies similar to Sandy, you see that same kind of trajectory. It's also especially similar to Canby because Canby and Sandy instituted a fare at the same time, and they saw this big drop. When your fare goes from 0 to anything, you lose a whole bunch of riders. It's not just the cash price, it's also kind of the hassle price, the uncertainty of having to pay a fare. So that's why there's a lot of the drop of ridership on Gresham and Estacada Expresses, but also macroeconomic factors are just causing people to ride transit less. And that's not about anything Sandy is doing. So this is a graph that shows you ridership on these services, ridership relative to service levels. I want to review how you get high ridership if you want high ridership. And that word if is really, really big because as much as people talk about transit ridership is not the only reason you run transit. In some communities, it's not the reason at all. Other reasons matter more. Reasons like making sure everyone has lifeline service no matter where they live. Making sure that all taxpayers feel that they're getting something in exchange for their contribution. Supporting development. with some service, even if it's symbolic. These are all reasons that you'll see transit service provided in ways and in places where high ridership relative to cost is not a reasonable expectation. But that's not the point. The point is to be there in case people need you, or to be there so that people feel like they're part of the system too. But if you want high ridership, then you follow the ridership recipe, which is fixed routes running high all day, all week frequency, so people can travel whenever they need to, following patterns of density, walkability, linearity, and proximity. This is how you bring the most useful destinations within a reasonable travel time of the most people. And that reasonable travel time is really what matters if you want high ridership, because you are competing against all the other choices people have: driving their own car, getting a ride from a friend, using a taxi or an Uber or Lyft, riding a bicycle, walking. This is what makes transit competitive. Density just means how many people are around each bus stop. Higher density, more people, more potential transit riders. Walkability means, can the people around the stop actually get to the stop? Because you can have places that are dense, but if the walking path to the stop is circuitous and long, or if people can't cross a major road like the highway, then they're effectively not near the stop, even if they could fly there very quickly. Linearity. Can transit run in straight lines that feel direct to through riders? So the line at the top goes past lots of important destinations, and everyone on it feels like they're being taken directly where they want to go. The line at the bottom has to reach those important destinations by making all these deviations, frustrating for through riders, and expensive to provide. The line at the top actually costs half as much to provide at any given frequency as the line at the bottom. So when land use decisions result in major destinations not being on the way to each other in a direct path, it actually costs more to serve them with transit. Or you serve them with worse transit, because you have to divide your transit budget into more shapes to go off and get to all these individual little places. So instead of a bus every half hour, you offer a bus every hour. Instead of 7 days a week, you can only run it 35 days a week. So this is partly about the rider experience, but a lot of this linearity issue is about cost. And that's an issue in Sandy. And then proximity. Again, the closer together things are, the less expensive it is to serve them with transit service, which means that if things are close together, either your transit budget doesn't have to be as big, or for the transit budget you have, you actually can provide more useful service. You can be there with higher frequency. You can be there more hours of the week because things are closer together. So I wanted to point out, and I did this last time, that these are all land use factors, and land use has a big impact on how useful transit can be in this community. This is a zoning map, so it doesn't reflect actual development. It reflects plan development, and I know that not all of it is coming true. But one thing we see that's very strong about Sandy is that Sandy is on the way to a lot of other places. Sandy is on the way between Portland and Bend, which means that there's a lot of transit coming through Sandy for a town its size. Sandy's own transit, the Mount Hood Express, and the bus to Bend from Portland stops in Sandy. So that's really cool, and that wouldn't happen if you weren't on the way. So zoning, so much activity along Highway 26 is really powerful in terms of transit orientation, because so many places become within reach of those developments, those jobs, those residents. But I have other concerns. There are pockets of the sort of village commercial and denser development that are not on the way to other places. And so if they develop, will Sandy Transit need to run a new route out to them? And if so, that's money not spent improving the frequency on the routes Sandy Transit already runs. So this is when things are not on the way, that's what the transit agency is forced to start doing. The Vista apartments are a great exemplar, right? They're not very close to town. They're not walkable. They're not on the way. But there's lots of people there with severe needs for transit. So probably in this plan, we're going to recommend that Sandy extend one of the shuttles to Vista, right? But that will be a service expenditure just for the Vista apartments, because they're not on the way to anyone else. So I'm not trying to dig up old, I don't know, this is like many generations passive land use decisions, but I want to point this out to you so that as you make land use decisions going forward, you ask yourself, is this dense thing we're planning, is this development on the way? Or will transit have to create a new route, a new expenditure that is only useful to this destination? Because that's the path that does not lead you to higher ridership. So, two key policy choices are coming up in this plan that are not about land use, enough about land use, they're about transit service. One is, how much of a limited budget should be spent pursuing high ridership? How important is that to this community? And that balance, what's left from that isn't used pursuing high ridership, can be spent providing service where it's needed or where it's expected, even if high ridership is not a reasonable expectation from those places. The second question is, what is the right balance of investment between local and regional service? And this relates a little bit to the ridership question because in general, regional service has higher ridership potential than local service. But right now, there's still things you can do with local service that will get fairly high ridership. Your regional services aren't getting very high ridership because of these macroeconomic forces. So this isn't as stark a choice about ridership as it usually is. And it's also very much about community identity. You know, are you a community where people can work in other places, or are you really just trying to get people circulating within Sandy? And so maybe that's not even something you can decide, it's something you have to respond to. So those are the two big policy choices. And here is what we have heard about them. In terms of ridership goals versus coverage goals, the stakeholder advisory group, which is 18 people, they went through a whole morning's training on basic transit design and transit planning and transit goals. So when we asked them this question, they had already a lot of training under their belts. A slight majority of them, 11 out of 18, said, we think higher ridership is a more important goal. And then less than half, 7 of them said, no, we think higher coverage is a more important goal. So not a big difference there, but mild support for higher ridership. Also, with regards to in-town trips, they all saw fixed routes as the more important higher priority transit tool relative to demand response, meaning dial-a-ride. So this matters because the ceiling on how much ridership you can do with a demand response service like dial-a-ride, paratransit, taxis, Uber, microtransit, all of these things are demand response. They come get you where and when you want. Physically impossible to move more than 6.5 people an hour with those. Whereas fixed routes, you know, your Gresham Express is moving 10 an hour. Yeah, so even when we consider a fixed route that's getting low ridership because of where we are in the historic cycle, it's still getting way more ridership than you can even physically do with demand response. Your dial-a-ride and paratransit is moving 2.5 people an hour, which is quite productive for paratransit. So if you want higher ridership, that suggests not expanding demand response services, but rather expanding fixed route services. So we asked the stakeholder group about this, and they said, we do see fixed routes for in-town trips as the more important tool, rather than expanding demand response. The online survey, slightly more support for increasing coverage rather than increasing ridership, improving existing service the way you would increase ridership. So more motivated to see an expansion of coverage. But the paper survey, those people said, no, we'd rather see an improvement on existing services rather than increasing coverage. Just slightly more of them said that. Of course, the paper survey, more of the paper surveys were taken by existing riders because we distributed them on buses. So if you ask existing riders of existing services, what do you want? They're a little more likely to say, the service already works okay for me, please make it better. Of course. We asked people about walking versus waiting. Are they willing to walk a little farther if it means that they get a more frequent service? And this relates to the ridership goals. On the online service, there was a modest preference for service designed to minimize waiting by asking them to walk a little farther. And same thing with the paper survey, slight preference for minimizing waiting. What this means is, or what the reason we ask this question is, if we are allowed to ask people to walk, we can concentrate routes into fewer lines, which means we can offer higher frequencies. And we can take out some squiggles, right? We don't have to go down every side road, which means we can offer people a quicker trip to where they're going. But it means they have to walk a little farther. Now, some people can't walk. If they can't walk, they're eligible for paratransit. They get a ride from their curb. If they don't want to walk and they don't mind making a reservation, they can use dial-a-ride. They get a ride from their curb. Most people are in a hurry. And so if they walk a little bit, or even roll a little bit, if they're in a chair and they're in an accessible sidewalk situation, they get where they're going sooner, most people tend to like that. So, yeah, that's what we see here. Modest, slight majority saying, yes, I'll walk a little farther if it gets me there sooner. Intercity versus within city service. The stakeholder advisory group, 14 out of 17 said intercity service is a higher priority for adding new service. The online survey respondents, slightly more support for intercity service, and the paper survey respondents were pretty much equally split between inter and within city service. So in summary, most people are in a hurry and they don't mind walking a little bit if it means they'll get there faster. If they can't walk, no, this plan is not going to eliminate paratransit, so there's always that safety net for people who can't walk. And then people in the community, unsurprisingly, value high ridership and wide coverage, with a little bit more support shown for the things you would do that would get higher ridership, but not provide quite as much coverage. Oh, let me tell you where we are in our timeline. I am consulting you in May, and then May, August, skip to the middle, we're going to develop the draft plan. And then August through September, we are going to show elements of the draft plan and eventually the whole draft plan to the public and ask for comments. And then in October, we're going to enter final plan development. So you'll definitely get an opportunity to see that draft plan at another meeting if you want one. It's, you know, I don't think we're going to be in the plan suggesting that anything be cut, which is a really nice situation to be in. But we're going to be looking ahead into the future and saying, if revenues become available, what can be added? What are the top priorities for adding service and also adding infrastructure? So I would be happy to take questions, comments. It's really up to you whether you want to give some kind of unified policy guidance at this point or individual feedback. I'll leave that up to you.
Could you go back just to the first kind of graph where you showed the drop-off on ridership? You know, I appreciate your comment, because my first thought was, well, everybody's riding because that's right after the recession and everybody's not got a job, and then all of a sudden the economy picks up, so now we're all jumping in our cars and riding. But you indicated that's when we offered a little bit of a fare.
But what you're describing is also part of the story.
Yeah, well, so back to the economics. In your recommendations, you see those lines going up, or are you going to make recommendations on how those lines might go up in some way? Because, you know, when you want to make break even, I mean, you got to sell product, you got to bring in money, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's I was wondering if, I mean, there's all the serviceability part, et cetera, whatever, but if more people are on, if more people are paying 50 cents or whatever the number is, at least you get more income.
Yeah. What's your fare box recovery ratio right now?
It's only about 8%
Yeah.
of our revenue.
So you're only recovering 8% of your costs through fares, which is totally normal for a town this size.
But what I find interesting is that precipitous of a drop for 8%. I mean, it just seems like if we figure out a way to make it free again, just for grins, okay, I mean, free is a very good price. I mean, the bottom line is it would serve the public. So I just find that interesting reaction, because the people who are riding obviously are getting to where they want to go some other way. They must think it's cheaper than whatever they're paying in the fare, which isn't much, right? So I don't know, they're sure not taking Ubers. I'm sure Uber's more expensive than the bus to go to Gresham, right? So.
Many agencies, especially in smaller towns and counties, are looking at graphs like this and looking at their budget spreadsheets and saying, isn't the cheapest way for us to increase ridership to just stop charging the fare? And it sometimes is. It has consequences. You have to manage a different kind of social situation. You have to have ways of taking people off the bus if they're just hanging out for too long. But it's something we'll consider.
I mean, there's no money, no free lunch. I mean, at the end of the day, you still got to pay for the service.
So I will add that we did in late 2016, SAM is free in town, and $1 if you're going out of town or you're boarding out of town to come into town. And the in town, the shopper shuttle, and the SAM are free.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many things were happening at once with that drop. That's the fare for out-of-town rides. As you say, the economy picked up, which means more people have jobs, which also means fewer people are going to community college. And community colleges generate a lot of transit ridership. In fact, fewer people go to any kind of college or university. Interest rates were kept very, very low for a long time, which made it very cheap to lease or buy cars. That has turned out to be a really big factor. And then the other thing is that low-wage jobs are dispersing. So it used to be that low-wage workers were going to places that were more transit-oriented, and now low-wage workers are needing to go to places that are far from transit, that are lower density places. So they just need cars more because they're, you know, higher wage jobs tend to be located in more transit-oriented places, cities, you know, denser places now. And the low-wage jobs are kind of dispersed and hard to get to without a car. So all those things are happening at once. And I think that's important.
I just wanted to say, just so that my fellow commissioners know, just the businesses here who are taxed, that for the ridership in general, what I heard when I was on the chamber was that they felt like not charging for the intercity, for the people to go to Gresham, was like they were paying for people to go shopping in another town. So having it free in town, I think, felt better to people that run businesses here in town. I had a question in terms of will you also be looking at how quickly our community is growing and the the need to go. So many people are now starting to live out here and go into Portland to work. And I was just hearing today on the radio how car ownership is going down, because in cities they're not, there's all these other options. So we're going to have all these suburban people living out here in Sandy. So is that part of the process, is looking at the growth of the city and
Yes, that
the
will
need to
be.
get those
And
people
so
in?
like one of the things that we'll talk about is at what point and it wouldn't just be Sandy, it would be Sandy, Clackamas County, Boring, and Tryman.
Mm-hmm.
Can those parties fund a connection to Clackamas Town Center? Because there's a lot of the region that it's a long way from Gresham to downtown Portland.
Mm-hmm.
It's even longer to like Oregon City.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
point.
so there's this little connection in Estacada right now,
Mm-hmm.
but is there a better way to plug Sandy into two parts of the regional transit network so
Got
that
it.
job access expands in that way as well?
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask you to bring something
Yeah.
up, Michelle, that you and Andy and I about? I think it would be a really good thing for the planning commission to hear from you, and that's for like the C3 village commercial designations, and if the city council is wanting to do a comp plan revision in the next couple of years here, and you kind of shared with me with that one. Basically, that one area that we had designated C3 would not be a good location for transit services. Could you just kind of share that?
So, does this work?
Because this body does get zoning requests.
Yeah, great. So this is, that's funny, it doesn't.
Doesn't work on a TV.
Screen.
Doesn't work on a TV. You're gonna have to use your natural given pointer. Your pointer.
I need a big stick. Go outside and get a big stick, so use the back of yeah, so if I could remake this map just so it was transit-oriented development, so that Andy can run, the service that is most useful to the most people. The pink stuff on this map, we recolored this map to make it, that doesn't matter why. Anyway, the pink spots on this map are village commercial and general commercial, and they're kind of out here. They're little islands, they're like an archipelago, and that's very charming if you think about how people would like to live in a village that's
these
surrounded
here.
by greenery and fields. But that's not transit-oriented development, unfortunately. That's agrarian development. So for that kind of development to be practical to serve with transit, It would just have to be closer to town. You know, there would essentially be pink zoning along the roads that leave town on their way to someplace else. And then kind of stepping down into lower and lower densities farther out. So I love the idea of the village in the fields because it sounds really nice and I'm sure I would like to live there. But if I lived there, I would not expect useful transit service because I would not be on the way to anywhere. And so the service that came my way would be justified entirely by me, and I'm not enough to justify more than 2 trips a day, right? So I wouldn't ride it. So that's my concern about the village commercial, is just that the way it's kind of scattered isn't transit. That's not a transit-oriented organization of that zoning. Also, you know, I think the downtown Sandy is very transit-oriented, very walkable, not too hard to cross the highway. You know, in places is difficult. But of course, when you get out into the more commercial, big lot commercial districts, the difficulty with crossing the highway makes it not very transit-oriented. So that's something we'll be saying in the plan, is that that should be a focus in improving the transit-orientation of the development you already have, is making it easier to cross the highway so that people can reach bus stops for both directions of their trip. Because if you don't do that, there's pressure for the bus to start pulling off the highway and into parking lots. And that makes the trip much less direct for anyone riding through. Thank you for prompting me to say that.
No, you just touched on something that I was thinking that triggered when you talked earlier about the linearity of and the expense of the circuitous routes and how that plays out of planning. And I'm just thinking, you know, we look at developments at this table, and I don't know that we've never had input from transit to say, boy, if you put that development in there, it's gonna cost us more to get transit out there. And I don't know that we can even use that as a means of, in the decision process. So it's, that process has to happen before us. Certainly with our input, because we would see the implications of it. It's just been, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And the way that plays out. And the other thing is sometimes those things sneak up on you. You know, 1 development, 2 development, 3 developments over the course of 5 years. All of a sudden you realize now you have an added expense that snuck up on you.
Yeah.
It's very intriguing how it all plays together.
And that's why I wanted Michelle to bring this up to you guys. So when we do our comp plan revision, I'm going to hire this firm to kind of look at it and give us their advice, because I don't think we want to, while I agree the village commercial is a great idea, I think we need to create it in a sense that it makes sense for transit as well. So.
And I saw in the comp plan that the village commercial designation, there's language about how it should be transit oriented, and I realized, oh, it could be, but not when it's in the wrong place for transit.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I just had 2 quick questions. The rate change, was that in 13 or 14? Is that why there's that big drop at that time?
Yeah, what was the year?
Yeah, it was 2013 that there was implemented.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the second question is could you tell me what impact unemployment has on transit in general?
Yeah.
Because, you know, in 13, I think unemployment was closer to 6.0, and today it's in the 3s.
Yeah.
So
Transit ridership tends to go down as employment goes up. I mean, there's sort of 2 things happening at once. People travel more when employment is up. So like you'll see traffic goes up. So there's more total traveling, but people have more money. So they're more likely to be able to afford to own, you know, a car, multiple cars in a household, and to gas their cars, insure their cars. So generally when employment gets better, transit ridership goes down.
So to echo what Don was saying, is in your draft plan, will you be forecasting that forward for the city for expectation on transit, just on transit ridership itself?
Transit
using
ridership
those factors
are almost always wrong.
All right.
And they're right, they just got lucky.
Okay.
So we won't do that.
All right.
I gotta tell you, I think, all the economists are saying this economy is too hot, people are in too much debt, and there will be an adjustment. I think with that graph, I think you were at the low point in your ridership. for intercity service, so. And we'll probably go back up for reasons that will feel pretty unfortunate to us in the rest of our lives. I don't know what's gonna happen with Uber and Lyft and driverless cars and stuff. Uber and Lyft may not make it, they may not make it to flight before they go off the cliff, because they're losing so much money, every year right now. Or they may, and that may change a lot of things, if they get to driverless cars before they run out of money. So that's also kind of unforecastable.
Thank you.
But I think I think that curve will pretty soon turn back up, because I don't think we can keep the economy this hot for this long. But I'm not an economist, I'm a transit planner, so don't listen to me.
Well, the good news is you told the truth there, because if you didn't know what the future is gonna be, you don't need to be standing here. You need to be out there, making millions of dollars, because you know what the future is gonna bring. So all we do know is there will be a recession. I mean, that's just the way it is. What goes up comes down. You just don't know when it's gonna be and what it's gonna be like and all the rest, so.
Yeah. So I'm interested if you have any reactions to this sort of big policy questions of how important is high ridership compared to getting a little service close to everyone? And how important is intercity service compared to within city service? Do you have any opinions about that?
Well, I would be a fan of improving the fixed routes and increasing ridership and not coverage. Because I feel like Sandy is really pretty walkable in a lot of in town. So keeping routes efficient and boosting ridership that way when there are other options like paratransit, that would get my vote. I think that would make the most logical sense for the system.
The only thing that just crossed my mind is, we just have close to being done, the biggest the biggest apartment housing complex in Sandy. We dealt with it just south of here. And how many people are gonna be in that? 300 to 400, right?
That's over
And that's,
Industrial Way?
no, it's off of Sandy Bluff, just directly south of the toll gate.
Okay.
And if you go top, and if you hit Sandy Heights,
Mm-hmm.
it's just right there on the corner. But it's huge. I mean, you go in there, it's your typical mega apartment complex. And so we see the one up here, makes it look small.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that one's remote, so it's visible and you see it, and there's all the issues with parking and on and on and on. So anyway, I don't know, Sandy, if you can go up that way or whatever, but I mean, you have those kinds of bubbles that you definitely would want to modify the routes to go by, because that's, personal apartments are probably going to be people that more likely would ride transit than single-family residential. But
I'd like to increase both, okay, and I'd like to, my wish list is to figure out how to take the transit information and incorporate it into the overall street planning to provide just better access around town. I think about just going around in a nice, more linear circle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
And so trying to go back in to get the interconnectivity, because I have a business in Sandy, and I always look at the traffic maybe differently than most, is Sandy has the people that live here traffic, and I'm gonna say that's 20% of the traffic going through town. 80% of it just wanna get through town. And we are kind of a bump in the road that they have to go through. So providing better access around town, which means getting off of Highway 26, more better connected roads. We have nice streets, et cetera, but how to make it so if there's a bus to go through and pick up people in town, just to make it nice, easy flowing routes to go through and pick up those different areas. So I think Sandy, if you come from the outside, I know all the little back roads, so I think everybody here does. But how to have that would be a little bit more flow.
Yeah.
your
That's
Sandy,
great. That's a
let's
great
go to your
point.
Sandy shopper, just make sure we're clear.
Yeah. I think
Go
that's a
there.
good point.
The other previous slide, just back in front of this one, because it's pretty graphic.
Oh.
It just is dated.
Yeah.
This one, this is dated. You see this big piece right here?
Yeah,
That's all apartments now.
yeah.
You need to put 1,000 more dots in that right there.
Yeah.
And so then the shuttle's going by that, And then go on turning out towards.
So the shopper route, actually, as I think about, okay, can in the future, the Vista Apartments be on the shopper route? What about development up, Bluff Road? The lack of local street connectivity is a real barrier to linear service. And yes, even a circulator can be linear. This one is not very linear, right? It's sort of serpentine, because it's getting to all these important places, Avamere, apartment buildings, social services. This is a great example, there's not a way to get from Bluff Road
No.
to the shopping.
The north side of 26 is much worse.
Yeah, and so the shopper shuttle has to do this huge deviation. And it's kind of okay for now, but it represents service spent on duplication and deviation instead of higher frequency or an extra round trip every day. And also, if we try to make those shopper shuttle routes longer, like to get to more places, that means everyone has to ride through those deviations on their way to Fred Meyer. So that lack of street connectivity does definitely affect this lack of linearity in the service.
The one thought I had when you asked about which our preference was that in attempting to get more riders, in other words, getting transit to more people, my thought is it's hard to go back on that. It's hard to go backwards on that. If you've got all these little spidery things going on, I mean, that's extreme, but it's hard when the economy changes and budget changes and so forth to draw back on that. Whereas the more singular, main trunks you could stay with. That was just thought that came to my mind.
Yes, coverage is, everything is an entitlement, but coverage, people start to build their lives around it. Even if it doesn't get much ridership, there's still a couple people whose lives depend on it. And how can you take it away? Whereas you can cut the frequency on a route without totally stranding people. So there's more pressure to maintain coverage.
One thing I want to say with Andy here and to you, that you touched on the pride. When I see the little shopper going around and it's a little red thing, first of all, I think that's got to increase ridership because it's like so visible. And it's also like, yeah, that's our city. So that's really
There's a
fun.
lot of positive comments in the surveys we got.
Yeah, the trolley.
People like-
Look.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I
Very
appreciate the way you
good.
explained
Yeah,
things.
my
Very well
pleasure.
done, very informative.
Well, I'm happy to be involved in, if you have conversations that are not really about the transit master plan, but you think that transit advice would be useful, just let me know, let Kelly know. Happy to help you think that through. I'm glad that the linearity stuff and the proximity stuff is resonating with you.
And one more comment is going through, I think people are worried on some of these transit streets of all the traffic that if they lived on coming through. And it just always brings to my mind more and more of the pedestrian access from little neighborhoods back to those and how important those are to make sure that and these guys do a great job of always making sure that there's those pedestrian access points.
That's right. I stayed in town last time I was here, because I had city council one night and the commission the next. And so am I allowed to rent an Airbnb?
Yeah.
I rented an Airbnb. Right over there, on a cul-de-sac. And I discovered, to my delight, that I could get off the bus and walk through the park to the cul-de-sac, and it went right through to the airport. It was
Yeah.
really neat.
That's
So
cool.
that really does, it just makes everything so much closer when you can have those connections. Well, if I can leave you with one simple piece of advice, if you want, and you can't solve this on a parcel by parcel basis or an application by application basis, but you can start to do it in like a comp plan and in your transportation system plan, get your developments to be on the way. That is how they will be transit oriented, is if they are on the way to other places. And we'll do our absolute best with everything we've got so far and everything that's in the pipeline.
And we are going through a TSPA update. We're actually in the final phase of signing the contract with the consultant and everything. And Andy will be on the technical advisory committee, so we'll be making sure that transit has a voice on that committee.
Excellent.
So if you're interested, we'll be back with the draft plan in, I don't know, September or something like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I feel like applauding.
I know, just so good at explaining things.
It really is.
All right, well, we will move right along. There is no old business. We rarely have old business. Seems like we only meet to have new business. And 2 public hearings tonight. So at 7:15, we will open the first public hearing, which is 18-034, the Bird Annexation. So we'll begin with calling for any abstentions from the Planning Commission.
I'm afraid I have to abstain.
Let me guess.
We did a small amount of work, but it was on for the applicant. I'm the owner of Lancaster Engineering, transportation engineering firm, and since we worked on the application, I'm gonna recuse myself,
Okay.
but not on the next one.
No. All right. Okay, any conflict of interest? Should we declare? Any ex parte contact? Everybody's familiar with the site location? Call for any challenges to the jurisdiction of the hearing body? Or any challenge to any individual member of the hearing body? Okay, if you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designate to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Staff report.
All right, so we're looking at an annexation tonight, and you'll be making a recommendation for bringing it to council next. Just to familiarize everybody again with where we're looking, it's a little east of Jacoby Road there, east of Cascadia Village and south of Timberline Trails. The property, it's one tax lot, 6.22 acres, and it would come in as conceptually zoned as single-family residential. It is contiguous to city limits on the southern boundary there. That's the Drake-Brewster annexation that came through a couple years ago. And then that Jacoby Heights that we reviewed a couple planning commission meetings ago is 2 properties to the west. So really what I think I'm going to direct the conversation towards tonight and ask for your input on is looking at Section 177850 that contains the 4 different criteria that a parcel would need to meet to be annexed. And the applicant is arguing that it would meet C, which is land for development to meet urban needs, and that meets a logical growth pattern of the city and encourages orderly growth. Due to the existing, I'm going to go to the next slide here, location of utilities, it's a little hard to see, but over on west of Jacoby Road, you can kind of see the blue lines there are the water lines, the brown lines are the sewer lines, and the green lines are the stormwater lines. And then this is the property in red here, and the arrows are just showing the contours, so that's how water would naturally, like gravity or gravity flow. So currently this site is not very easily going to be able to connect to any sort of public utility. So primarily sewer and water would be kind of the main concerns potentially. First of all, it actually has no public access to a public road. There is an access easement going to it, but it does not front on any public roads. And they would need an easement from one or more property owners to connect to sewer or water. So I guess what we're kind of asking tonight is maybe to have a discussion about whether you think this would be a logical growth pattern and if it encourages orderly growth. And I will leave it at that.
Okay.
I'm just looking up with trying to understand the access to that. Is it like, it doesn't show on the tax records, is it like even a flag lot, it's just,
It's not a flag lot. There's actually the lot to the, let's see. Can you see the arrow on here? Oh, whoops.
we did.
This lot here is outside of city limits, and there's I think it's an 8.5 or an 8.25 foot flag that's actually technically outside of city limits, separating this Jacoby property we talked about before.
Can you?
Point to it.
From the property to the south.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an access easement that go along both of those flags, which together are about 17 feet. And then across the other property, yep.
These are both flags, right?
But there's no utilities.
Yes.
So the access, well, what, the
It's
yellow
no
line,
utility easement,
the
just
yellow line that
access.
comes into there, you just showed, Kelly, I'm confused on that. Because it looks funny when you zoom back out, it almost looked like, I mean, what, is that little piece in the city?
No,
That, well, let's zoom back out just a little bit for a second.
I can't zoom, this is just a slide.
Well, this thing here,
Or I
this
can
thing here
go to the
doesn't
other
make any
slide.
sense to me, and that's all I'm trying to understand.
It's
That's
part-
outside of the city.
Yeah, it's part of the flag for that lot that your fingers are by.
Yes.
So it's in this,
It's not in the city.
oh, so this is in the city,
No.
this is in the city, this is not in the city, this is in the city.
Correct.
Okay, that helps.
We should know how that kind of stuff to happen. Lord.
Well, we did 2 years ago, so.
Is it,
So all of this
is there any
in the
reason
city.
why the house, the property to the left
This is.
This is
isn't
not.
looking to be annexed?
This is-
I don't think they've approached us yet.
Yeah,
have they?
we haven't heard anything.
Wasn't that gentleman just in
But
here?
would you get, I mean, is the way that you get to this lot, is you just have, would this property owner have to agree to,
There's already an easement for access,
through here?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and down both of
It appears
those.
like it's getting impacted his driveway pretty quickly.
That's to get at it as it exists right now.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna build 36 houses on there, obviously it would look a lot different. So, yeah.
So Emily, the utilities stop over here,
Yeah,
is that right? Okay.
But of course, we all know that that's Jacoby Heights, just to the
Mhm.
left, that we just got done
Right.
fussing with.
Right.
Yeah, over two.
And so this piece in the middle is gonna be sandwiched, so something likely will happen there, but.
yeah, I mean, so the subject property, I mean, they couldn't connect to city utilities unless they could get an easement across that, you know, either out towards Langensan across multiple properties, or and then they would have to, I believe, pump the sewage, because it wouldn't be gravity, the gravity would be taking it towards Langensan.
Mhm.
So I think they would have to pump the sewage up, and then I think there's, you know, I think Public Works would want a private pump or something, so they didn't have to deal with, you know, maintain it. So
Yeah, there's
there
a-
could be, just currently, I think development would be very difficult.
The Public Works Director estimated that there would probably be a couple houses that would be able to be served by gravity sewer out to Jacoby, and then the rest of it be on pumps.
The rest would have to be pumped. And then who pays for that in the long run? Is it the city or
Well,
the
the developer would have to
developer?
pay for it.
Mhm.
Up front or
With-
ongoing?
With the development, yeah. Like when they're installing the roads and all the
Mhm.
utilities, they'd be doing the
Mhm.
pump system at the same time, most likely.
And then the city has to maintain it after the developer's done? What
No.
happens,
I
like
don't
20 years
I don't
out?
think it would be a public pump, I think
Yeah.
it would be private in this case.
Yeah, I don't know.
When
That
the
would be
pump
part of
gives
kind
out.
of the-
Yeah, when the pump gives
discussion.
out, that's what I'm wondering about.
Why does it belong here? Is there an applicant presentation?
He lives in Alaska, I believe, so he was, or is it Texas?
Texas.
Texas on the
Texas.
tax law
It's a big
records.
state far away.
Big state parkway. I did talk to him last Friday a couple times on the phone, and then he did email, I think.
Oh, yeah, I did pass
There's
out,
an
we got
email here.
two
Yeah.
late comments today, one is the stamp we
Mhm.
want to get for all of the annexations, and the other was an email from the applicant.
tell you what I'll do is I'll just, so we go through the formalities of these other things. I'll give the opportunities, in the odd chance that one of these gentlemen is either the applicant or has an opinion on it.
Yeah, what I was gonna finish with, Jerry, is when I talked to him both last week and then today, is that he said he couldn't make it for this meeting, but I think he's watching right now. And then he was gonna be interested and then potentially fly up for the council decision.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Which is a good reminder to us that what we do on this one is just make a recommendation
To the city.
to the council. So is the applicant here officially for presentation? Okay, any proponent testimony if you're in favor of the application? Or any opponents in the room that are not in favor? Or anybody have a question? Now we can go back to discussion. And eventually
So
somebody
is
will.
this Ian Bird is just part of the
close it.
record? That's him?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, that's part of the record.
yes.
And I did answer his question there, and yes, he could build a single-family home without subdivision of land, because it's a lot of record or
Mhm.
through deeds, so. He just wanted to make sure that by annexing, he wasn't giving up that right.
Mhm.
And has anybody, with the Tickle Creek in there, I think that's part of his, is like, how much land is he really gonna have? I mean, even based upon today's calculations.
Well, I think
Right.
that's the gist of his
Yeah,
email, is that he's a little concerned.
and rightfully so.
Mhm.
And that concern would be, for instance, if the fish standards were to change and become more, what?
Different.
Yeah, different, take more land,
Mhm.
that could happen later on. And what you were suggesting is that we put the condition that they would be governed by the standards in place at that time, not, because the fish is the one that's gonna be the
Yeah.
critical one.
So that, I'll maybe just address that. That was part of my recommendation to staff in terms of having that condition. And really, I didn't mean to make more out of it than I think maybe perhaps it's being taken. Anything, once they come to apply for it, is gonna be based on any development, right? There's the
Yeah.
annexation piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then they choose in the future to come and develop the property, then there are gonna be standards that they have to meet at that time. It's not just the fish, but any section of your code is gonna be the standards that are in effect at that time. The reason here I just thought it was unique is because you actually do have a fish assessment being prepared to sort of give the outline of what the restricted area is now. And that's really the only piece of your code that's being looked at, and I get that, because it's a new piece of property. So all I wanted to do was just be clear about the fact that simply because the fish analysis had been done on one level for the purposes of this application, that doesn't mean that the fish is satisfied.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's all.
right. It doesn't cast it in stone just by doing it.
So Emily, can you say a little more about the staff recommendation then?
We don't really have one, I guess. We're kind of looking towards you to weigh in on whether you think it's logical growth, in order.
So if we were to annex this, sorry,
it's
I
okay.
just want to be clear. If we annex this, then the city has to provide utilities and sewer?
No.
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 Okay.
Just that if we annex it, and they really essentially would not be able to develop it at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, the developer has to pay for it, which is probably why the guy in the middle is waiting for Jacoby Heights to get done. And then,
But he also, when he was here, he mentioned that he just put a new home on that property too.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
in the middle.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
well, you can
seem
see the home.
logical to me.
Anyway, well, I think what it is, I mean, we basically either recommend it to council that we approve it or not. And that's the recommend, that's up to us to do, and, you know, so I suggest that we'll just move forward with the words that are in here that to clarify that.
Well, again, we're coming back to, do we pass it, do we recommend it or not?
Yeah, is it a
Okay.
logical?
Yeah. And so
Or
my
any of
question.
the others, I mean, if you think it meets A, B, or D, we
Well,
don't.
I'm just asking a question of, for Mr. Bird, if he was here, what are the downsides of annexing, you know, the pros and cons of it. Okay? By doing it today, is it gonna cost them more taxes? Is it gonna save them anything in the future? Does it bring back, does the city incur more, do they have to do more once it's in the city limits?
I think the property taxes go up, but it's fairly negligible.
I think it's like $4.12 per thousand.
Well, that's his problem. That's not our problem.
Yeah.
I mean, he asked if we annexed. Do we see as a council anything that would say we as a city would not want to see it annexed? I mean, it's,
Well, I'm kind of asking your question a little bit different way. I'm just kind of looking for what's the downside to either the city or to the applicant for it.
yeah, all I'm saying is I care about the city.
So
That's
just one piece of, one thought.
Oh, this.
You know, generally speaking, this is property that was brought in as part of the UGB expansion. All things being equal, especially in this state, you know, when you've got property that is urbanizable within a UGB, that's expected at some point to be within a city. So really what we're talking about here is not so much, at least in my mind, the question about whether it meets your criteria as they're written now, and particularly criterion C, which is what the applicant said. Mr. Bird said, I think it meets this. It's not so much if it will ever come in, but when, is this the right time for it? I mean, eventually, just by virtue of having expanded your UGB and doing that successfully, it's assumed that all of that is going to be eventually within the city.
Yeah, and I think it's good, to me, sooner or later, because the one thing went through my mind, I created a couple maps because I zoomed out, because I wanted to go over to Langston, I guess it's on the other side, east. So it's about time we sat back and started looking at this big piece of property and says, how's it gonna build out? That's what went through my mind, because you got Jehovah Heights, and then he does this, you know, and we've had the other person in the south come at the Jehovah Heights meeting, so you can see the dominoes starting to fall. So the more certainty you can put into anything, the better. And if that piece is in, check, that's one piece that's in, and that provides one more piece of information for that big block of how it's gonna develop.
So it sounded like that we would be comfortable with the C. And don't let me put words in your mouth, the land development to meet urban needs, and that meets a logical growth pattern of the city and encourages orderly growth. I'll give you, my thought is, granted, it may not be to some all that logical, because they might say, well, this middle piece should come next, and then this piece, and, you know, that they should go in that kind of fashion. We can't make that happen. I think what David is saying is this is all gonna eventually come in, and what you're saying too, is it's a piece of the puzzle, and he wants to come in now. So it's kind of logical in a greater scheme of things than on these little individual pieces.
Yeah, well, if we get it in domino effect, then that means that each guy is holding the next guy hostage. And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't want to do that at all. I mean, nothing else, it makes the guy in the middle think twice. It's kind of like it's like that little house that's on the south end of Manhattan, that everything is built around in this one little house, because she would not sell. And on each side of her are 50 skyscrapers. That's kind of one of the infamous pictures that's back there, you know.
Well, I think with the city is, I can't see any reason why not, why to object to it, of not bringing it in. It's
No,
within their urban growth boundary. I mean, there is anything the city's brought up to say why we should go ahead with it. It's his right. We might
Okay.
say move on to council.
It's
How
definitely
about-
right.
Do we make any kind of recommendation on the zoning on it, like single-family residential? Or
No.
is that later?
That's already done.
That's already done.
That's already done.
It would come in as conceptually zoned, which is single family.
Conceptually.
Well,
I mean,
That
that's
was
what-
what the application
Well, I'm ready to
was.
make
That's what he's
a motion
requested.
if you want to
And-
close the hearing and move on.
Yeah, we need to close, but that is when it comes in, it will come in with the zoning.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
They're
what
not
he
asking for
requested,
it.
yeah.
It's what the zoning that was,
Right,
the
they're not
UGB
asking
was
for anything
premised on,
different.
all your studies were premised on it being single family.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify, the fish overlay will be applied.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we need the hearing closed.
I would close the public hearing.
A second.
Been moved and seconded. to close the public hearing at 7:35. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we are closed. And we can go right into a motion, I believe. It would be recommending, we'll have to recommending to city council to approve it.
Yeah.
with-
I'll move
with
that.
the condition.
I'll move that we recommend to city council the annexation of 18-034, Annex Bird subdivision with the recommendations as stated by planning staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Chris? To forward on to city council. 18034, our recommendation that they approve it with the findings in the staff report. Ready for a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Carlton,
Yes.
Commissioner Lasowski,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan,
Yes.
Commissioner Bain,
Yes.
and Chairman Crosby.
Yes, motion passes. We okay to move right along?
Somebody's gotta make a move sometime.
You guys okay to?
Yes.
move right
Yeah, I'm
along?
sorry, Jerry.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Make
Sorry.
sure. Let me- Move around. Okay. We'll go right ahead and open the next public hearing at 7:37. This is file 18-030, Funtime RV, design review, conditional use permit, and variance. Any abstentions to declare? And welcome back.
Until, are you gonna abstain on this one?
I'm staying.
We
Good.
won't know what to do.
Who are you?
Yeah. Any conflict of interest?
Go back to training.
Anybody? Any ex parte contact to mention? Everybody's familiar with the location? Call for any jurisdictions, any challenges to the jurisdiction of the planning commission? Any challenge to any individual member of the planning commission?
1, 2.
Okay, if you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comment should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing, or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Mr. Kramer.
All right, so before us today we have Funtime RV, which is file number 18-030. As mentioned, it is for design review, which also includes a minor conditional use and a special variance.
Yeah.
They're also doing the other one.
The lower one?
Yeah, well, the storage units are doing.
Not yet. They haven't moved any dirt yet on that.
There sure
No.
looks like it, because everything is clear down to the creek.
They have the access road, that's why it looks like it,
Yeah.
for the Tractor Supply at the west end. It looks like it, but yeah, I drove back there. The
Not supposed to yet. We haven't released the grading permits. But, and then I'm just trying to think of anything else that you might have noticed around town. Maybe you guys just have some questions. The apartment building that I think you brought up, Dawn, earlier, Sandy Place Apartments there in Sandy Heights. If you can actually drive back in there now and check it out. Those are, that project went together really fast. And I think they're gonna be hopefully done with the whole thing in 2019, they said. I think by like September, October, they're hoping.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I drove in there before there was anybody in there just to poke around and see, and I mean, it's replication, I mean, et cetera, so it's kind of like, you wanna talk about it, you wanna do it. Time's money.
Something I noticed and somebody asked me about last night was east of town, all the clearing on the south side of the road. Is that?
Is it just west of Shorty's?
It's on Naps.
Yes,
It's on
just
Napsel.
west of.
That's
Shorty.
a
Just-
gigantic solar field.
Oh,
Gigantic
really?
Sussex
solar
County, right?
field.
Yeah, 56
Just on the
acre
other side
one.
of the city.
Yeah,
Kind
so
of,
I-
Whoa.
it's kind of like this.
Gigantic, yeah, and so I sent in comments on behalf of the city on that one, and a few other ones around, the city saying we want screening, but we'll see. It made it into their staff report that they're required to do screening, but I'm not gonna hold my breath on
So
how.
in that kind of
this
a,
is.
it's kind of
I
a
mean, it's in the county, right?
rolly hilly.
And is that on Knapp's property?
Yeah.
So you did request on the behalf of Sandy that it's screened?
I mean, so I'll give you guys a little heads up. There's like 3 of them being proposed at once. One of them's off Kelso, one's down there, and one's off at, off Bornstead on,
Well, there's one at Bornstead and Trumbull,
Was it
as we
Trumbull?
speak.
Trumbull, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's there.
I know, so on
Okay.
all 3 of those, I commented that they need to do screening because the proposals didn't include that, and their code was very clear that they should do it, but the county wasn't
Enforcing it?
enforcing their code, and so they actually got a decision from their attorney, and the attorney agreed with my interpretation. So hopefully, they actually screen these facilities like they're supposed to be doing, so. Because it's gonna be a pretty big, I mean, I'm all for renewable energy, but it's also gonna be a pretty big eyesore coming in on the east side of our town if there's
Mhm.
80 acres of solar panels with no service.
You know, if they could take those panels, you know how they sit in this big thing, and just use it like a pixel picture and put the Sandy logo on it. So you can see it from the air.
Think about how you can make money.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to, I keep bringing this up, I brought it up a little bit earlier, but as sitting here in this town every day and being impacted by it is, I think that the traffic plan, not that there isn't a plan, but of really trying to have the city council, whoever's governing this, come to grips with how we're gonna move people around this town more efficiently. And from a planning side is, how do I influence that more, if it is even possible? Every time I ask about things, oh, we don't have the money. But we have all these things going in, and then they're just a bunch of dead ends. I mean, the streets go off and then they stop. But really, what's the plan for the interconnectivity? I know it's there.
Yeah, so I can give you a brief update on that. So we are finalizing the TSP agreement with the consultant firm that we're going to be working with. So that should happen. It's basically almost done, but then it has to go to like the Department of Justice for a 2-month review. That's like bureaucracy at its best right there, for a $160,000 grant. But then, so hopefully by August, that will actually be up and running. And then, in the meantime, the mayor and city manager went down to Salem and got an additional grant somehow from ODOT to do a bypass study. And then, I think just last week, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, David, but the vehicle registration fee that they were going to increase for $25 per vehicle was passed without any appeals or objections. That was my understanding. And because of that, then they can borrow on making the improvements to like 362nd and Bell.
Did you talk about the counties?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
So that would give us and you'd need to talk to Mike Walker about this to get a better picture of it, but my understanding, it would give us a guaranteed revenue source going into the future that then we can have borrowing against. And then that would allow us to do some of these road connections like potentially Bell, 362nd, Kate Schmitz, DeBarco, and now we'll be able to probably loan to do a lot of those. So the big hurdle now will probably be acquiring the right of way, less so on the actual how we're going to pay for it. So that was actually pretty big news that we just found out about.
That is big news.
Yeah, it is
Last
big
week.
news, yeah.
And I guess there was some big, I know the mayor was tracking it pretty heavily and a few of the council members and Mike, and there was some pretty big question marks lingering because I thought there was going to be an appeal to it, and apparently nobody appealed it. So.
The appeal period expired?
I think it was a signature collection effort that that failed.
Okay, that's what I saw, the
Okay.
signatures, yeah.
Yeah, they
See,
did-
that's why I don't know the specifics, but.
Yeah, they tried to refer it and they didn't get it. Either they didn't get enough or they didn't do enough in time. I had one of
Huh.
On your subdivisions that, you know, keep popping around, is there any interest on what used to be called Vista Loop South? That piece of property and,
It's funny you bring that up. That's actually one of the other ones I was gonna just briefly mention, is because we just, Emily James and I, David wasn't along for the ride. Too expensive for the ride. But we actually.
I can be a cheap ride.
We actually drove out there last week and we're walking around for a little while, so, yeah, they did a lot of clearing. Not too much tree damage, a little bit. But they were clearing a lot of brush to start surveying the site again. So apparently there is some renewed interest.
Okay, that's the
is it-
property I was asking about.
Oh, okay.
There's actually two cleared areas. Now, I know which one you were talking about now, but I was thinking the one across from Vista.
yeah, because,
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, because back to the whole conductivity thing, that whole thing, if that goes in, that will connect DeBarco to the highway. You wanna talk about a discussion?
Yeah.
We talk about when DeBarco hits the highway and what that's gonna look like.
Lois Coleman may finally get her.
She may get
traffic
her
light.
tunnel.
Yeah.
Lois was on the
Yeah,
commission
so-
and he wanted a tunnel
Was it a
underneath
tunnel
the
or an
road.
overpass?
Right, cause how the kids gonna get across now?
Yeah.
So to answer your question,
Traffic
Ron,
light.
I guess that was a very long-winded way of
No,
saying.
no.
We're kind of getting money, we're getting some discussions going. I don't think there's anything that's gonna happen immediately. But as you know, in the planning realm and in the government realm, everything moves along very slowly, so.
Actually, from where we were even a year ago, 2 years ago, we've made some big giant steps.
That's good to hear, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
planning is fine, and like, you know, you can do a study on the bypass, that's only been done how many times, but the money is the problem. I mean,
Is the bypass
you had $1 billion
study-
today, would you go around Sandy, or would you do the Columbia River crossing?
What would I do? I would do neither.
I mean, I know what we would do, but what do you think Salem's gonna do?
Is the bypass study, is that, you said they did get grant money for that?
It's not, I don't know if it's really, it's like grant money. It's basically ODOT, the executor, the director of ODOT gave the city just extra money to do a study.
Or would that be rolled
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
TSP or a separate contract?
A separate contract, but they will be interlinked. So I don't know. I don't know the exact timing or how that will all work yet.
Interesting.
It's a good question. I don't know, I don't have an answer yet. I just found out about it like a month ago that we actually got a bunch of additional money to do a separate bypass study, so.
I always remember, it was like 20 years ago, I was down in Texas working, and in the town, they had the same issue of the bypass. And what they did, they went overpass, and they just put all the bypass traffic on stilts right over because they couldn't
Kinda like
get into the
downtown
property.
Kind of like downtown Portland, the east side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, the west side.
Airport Way in
I guess.
Seattle.
Look at how that's.
Yeah.
The west side, where the, what is
Oh,
that,
exactly,
neonatal
city.
parkway, that used to be like that too, I guess.
Yeah.
A double decker or whatever.
I want to see how that viaduct, how that overpass is gonna fit the Sandy style as you go right through town.
heavy timbers. Big
It's
heavy timbers.
There we go.
Really big timber.
I think that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, somebody can have the honors.
I move that we adjourn.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned.
A lot of rock and heavy timbers, yeah.